All right, guys, so you've seen how we can fetch data from a text file, a local JSON file, and an external API. Now I want to go a little deeper and talk about REST APIs and also some of the other types of requests that we can make with AJAX and the fetch API, which we'll talk about later on, because up to this point we've just been dealing with GET requests. Now, before we get into REST, let's talk a little bit about what an API is in general. So it stands for Application Program Interface, and that's a very broad term. There's all kinds of APIs. We're specifically talking about web APIs, but there's also APIs in your computer, in your operating system, in your smartphone, even some refrigerators. There's many devices that have different types of APIs. So this is very generalized, but it's essentially a contract provided by one piece of software to another. And it usually consists of a structured request and a structured response. So one piece of software says, give me this information formatted in this way, and I'll give you this data or this function or whatever that response may be. Now, the last video was a perfect example of a web API. It takes a request, which was the URL along with the number of jokes that we wanted, and it processed that, and then it sent back a response formatted as JSON with the Chuck Norris jokes. Okay, that's a web API. All right, so what is REST? So REST stands for Representational State Transfer, and it's an architectural style for designing networked applications, and it works by relying on a stateless client-server communication protocol, and in almost all cases this is HTTP. So REST was made to treat objects on the server side as resources that can be created, updated, and destroyed, and of course read. An example of a server-side object would be a blog post or a user, something like that, and it's usually stored in a database. Now, we can create a post, or we can create resources with a post request. We can delete with a delete request, and so on. Now, what makes REST so awesome is that since it operates using just HTTP requests and usually some standard like JSON, it can be used with virtually any programming language. So any language like JavaScript, PHP, Ruby, Ruby on Rails framework, Java, Python, all of these languages are perfectly capable of working with REST APIs. All right, so just remember, an API is the messenger, and then REST lets us use HTTP requests to format that message. Okay, a REST API takes in multiple types of HTTP requests. We've already used GET, and we will be working with others. In fact, in the next video, we're going to create our own custom AJAX library to making these requests easier, to make post requests and put requests and so on. All right, so let's look at the different type of requests. Okay, so we've already made GET requests, which retrieves data from a specified resource. Okay, we used a GET request to get the text file data, to get the users .json file data, and to get the Chuck Norris jokes. Now, a post request is usually used to submit data to be processed to a specific resource. So to add a post to a database, or to add a user, something like that. A put request is usually used to update a specific resource that's already on the server, and then a delete request, of course, is used to delete a specified resource. Now, there's others as well, such as head, which is the same as GET but doesn't return a body, it just returns the header. We have options, which returns the supported HTTP methods of that specific server or API, and then patch, which updates partial resources. Okay, so it's similar to put, but we're going to focus on the main four. All right, now when you have some kind of API, whether it's your own or whether it's an external API, you're going to have something called endpoints, and endpoints are the URLs that you access to do certain things. So a common endpoint to get users, let's say we had an API that allowed you to create, read, update, and delete users, you would make a GET request to something like someurl.com/API/users. All right, now it's completely up to the API how they want to format the URLs. Sometimes you might see a subdomain like api.someurl.com/users, something like that. This one here is an example of getting a single user, so it would be API/users / and then whatever the ID of that user. All right, this is a post request, so this would add a user. So it would be a post request to /API/users. Now notice that these two are the same exact URL, and that's absolutely fine because they're different methods. Okay, one is a GET request, one is a POST request. So you can have the same URL as long as they're different methods. This would be an example of a PUT request to update a user. All right, now it's important to note that with POST, PUT, and DELETE, you're going to send data along with your request because it needs to know the post data to add. It needs to know which post to which post to update, as well as the data that you want to update it with. All right, so you would send data with these types of requests, and you're going to see how that works. And then delete, of course, would delete a user based on the ID passed in the URL. Okay, so notice that all of these URLs are the exact same, but they're different requests. Okay, now sometimes you may have an API that formats it differently. It would be like user/delete/1, and this would be user/update/1. So you might see something like that as well. All right, so like I said, we're going to start to work on our own AJAX library that we're going to create called EasyHTTP. But before that, I just want to do a quick aside video on callback functions.